Mahamudra is a very profound idea that infinite consciousness and infinite unconsciousness are forever and always inextricably bound. The word Mahamudra means the great seal or the great knot, and that the idea is that the ocean of infinite consciousness and the arising of infinite unconsciousness arise perfectly at all times, at all places, in total revelation of themselves. Simultaneously. Having moved through the dynamics of the acquisition of the path, the appearance of the three worlds, the revelation of the four bodies, three relative bodies, and the absolute body of consciousness. All of these combining into an amalgam of stages and states. In other words, the given conditions out of which the varying states of perception and experience arise. The stage is the platform, and the state is the experience of the traveler. From the standpoint of life, from the standpoint of the arc of the travel of the spiritual panorama, which is the basis of spiritual life, are experienced as a very specific set of states in relationship to those stages. These are two givens that arrives at an infinite number of solutions, each solution being unique to each perceiver. In how the map is negotiated. Having traversed these stages through the series of states of awakening, to the point where one, on one's own steam, arrives at a condition, a state of consciousness where you directly apprehend the fourth state, the original basis, the substrata of all reality, giving rise to a supraconscious state. In other words, one's consciousness becomes aligned with the strata of consciousness that appears before the assembly of consciousness of identity. This is called samadhi. It translates as the intuitive recognition of the highest truth. In other words, you have an experience that is beyond the senses, beyond the mind, beyond identity. It is the first attainment of genuine high ground. It is not what one would call The first acquisition of samadhi would not what one would call enlightenment or complete enlightenment, but it is the entrance into the ballpark of enlightenment. You finally have the direct means to perceive the truth. And this idea of samadhi, where one's consciousness, and by the time one achieves samadhi, there has been a dissolution of separate identity. In other words, the ego has begun to expire. Remember that the ego is not taken out in one solid shot. It'd be too traumatic. Because the idea of the awakening of a human being is that is to transfer the person's consciousness from the bound condition to the liberated condition. And so, as we talked about in the previous session, the effect of grace, the effect of Shaktipat, is the eroding away of the basis of the ego, the systematic eroding away of the basis of the ego, which is what I refer to as the unspooling of karmas and sanskaras. As these sanskaras and karmas are unspooled, the solidity, the suchness of the ego, the basis of the existence of the ego is undermined, and it begins to appear more and more like a chimera, an apparition, to the point where it just starts to become a mist, a ghost that you see through, and has less and less reality. This is the underlying spiritual content of sadhana, and the more important part. The dynamic of moving a person's consciousness to a point where they experience a lot of light and a lot of consciousness is relatively easy. But the exhaustion of the underlying samskaras and karmas, where that transference holds, is more important. Because stages and states has a kind of a radical line. You'll be up, you'll be down, you'll be in the middle, up, down. There's a kind of rhythm to it, and there are tempos to existence. This is one of the important dynamics between the student and the teacher, because the way human nature is, people tend to like to repeat what they're good at and avoid what they're not good at. And one of the basic jobs of the teacher is to push you into the areas of your own attention that you're not good at, and begin, so you get a completely filled out arc of attention where the ego is being subverted across the board. At the same time, you are constantly refining and enhancing and expanding your repertoire of experience of states through your daily practice, your constant mindfulness. And due to your exposure to your teacher, the teacher will be systematically exposing you to the view of reality beyond the appearance of the six senses. This will happen both consciously and unconsciously, because from the standpoint of the teacher, you are always consciousness, you are always realized, you're always enlightened. At this point in time, the enlightened aspect of yourself is simply unconscious. It is recessive, and what is dominant is the ego-dominant reflex of samskaras, karmas, which are popularly known as klesha-born proliferating obscurations. Sounds like a real headache. Don't worry, you'll get over it. Take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. And that has to be systematically exhausted. And that's the long haul in terms of spiritual life. Because you'll have ups and downs. The idea of beginning, you'll start to have by contact with samadhi. Because how do we learn? We learn by seeing it and repeating what we've seen done. It's the fastest way to learn anything is to watch somebody who knows how to do something, do what they do. You just watch them closely and things start to pop out at you and you start reproducing them in yourself. At the same time, there's a kind of conversation when we are in these kinds of settings. The conversation is multi-leveled. We have verbal cognition to keep the show going, but there's also communication taking place on all of the levels of physical, subtle physical, causal, and supracausal. There is a flow of speech. And that is setting up a reverberation of consciousness in the system that is intensely accelerating the process of the subversion of the ego. And in this way, it is very much the teacher is staging an argument for the case for liberation against the case of bound existence, the bound existence of the egocentric I. Every time we get together, it's a big debate. You're sitting there going, the egocentric I, and I'm going, no. The egocentric I is out, the self is in. And it's a long-term argument. A kind of debate. If you ever want an example of the ingeniousness of human consciousness, to watch the permutations of the ego under the full attack of the guru. They move left, they move right, they move forward, they move back. Very ingenious.